Welcome to the City Council Special Budget Study Session for April 11th, 2019. I will call that meeting to order. The roll call, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Slater?
Here.
Councilmember Abraham? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Here.
Councilmember Henderson?
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick? Here. Councilmember Pennington?
Here. All present. We have one discussion item this evening. C1 is the proposed fiscal year 2019 and 2020 annual budget and three-year budget. So I'm going to turn this meeting over to City Manager Miller. Mark, in the past, it's been preferred to go through the presentation, then have questions at the end. Is that
yes?
How you would like to do it?
Yes.
Sounds good. Good evening.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and members of council. Thank you very much for conducting these two study sessions, one tonight and one Monday. And I want to really thank all the staff for all the work they've done, and especially Tom. This is the most important thing we all work on, and I think it's probably a project where most amount of staff actually work on the same project. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. So let's get started. We have a lot of slides. First, I'm going to go through the strategies and then summarize all funds, and then we'll turn it over to Tom, and he'll discuss the general fund summary. We'll turn it over to Frank Nassasi, who will talk about the police department, and then Dave Roberts will talk about the fire department, Kurt Bowman-Seep about public works, and the recreation department, Elaine Bowe, and then we'll get to the capital fund, and both Tom and I will talk a little bit, and then we'll get to the water and sewer funds, where Tom will talk a little bit, and Kurt also. And then finally, we'll have questions, and if there are questions we can answer in the meeting, we'll do that. And if we can't answer it, we'll get answers to you before the next meeting and talk about it at the next meeting. Number one, strategy, which was adopted by council, to evaluate the Trails and Pathways programs with a focus on public participation and creative problem-solving to build community support. And what we see is the city updating our 5-year Parks and Recreation Master Plan and having trails as part of that. And we can do it within our existing budgets for consulting services. We don't really need to have special funds allocated. Number two, gather community input, reassess the most recent town center initiative, and develop a plan for future of the Civic Center. We're working on that right now. We all have seen, we've had a study session for community survey. We're all giving input on the community survey, and I'm sure once we get done with this budget process, we can all give that a little bit more time. 3, determine the customer service needs of City Hall, incorporate the findings of the facilities condition assessment into a maintenance plan for our facilities. Number 4, establish a comprehensive capital improvement program and a planning process that is reviewed and implemented on an annual basis. This is more of, we do this, but we want to up our game a little bit more. Number 5, convene the Charter Revision Committee to evaluate charter language and millage limitations and develop a strategy to fund the library past 2021. Number 6, determine public transportation service needs and implement a revised plan for the Big Beaver Shuttle and Medigo. Number 7, update the Parks and Recreation Plan and incorporate the Green Space Subcommittee recommendations to protect and invest in the city parks. And that has a relationship with Trails and Pathways because it's Parks and Recreation related. Number 8, evaluate the Volunteer Firefighter Incentive Plan, also known as VFIP, to ensure the policy is reasonable, sustainable in the long term. And I would add to that, and also to recognize and maintain and allow our volunteers to stay with us for a longer period of time to provide high-quality fire services. Number 9, study the feasibility of a Rochester Road Improvement District, and once again, this is something we can do within our existing budgets and existing staff, and supplement that with consultants. Number 10, develop a plan to effectively engage residents and businesses throughout the community through community conversations. That's more community engagement, My Civic app, and also the community survey. Any questions on the strategies? All right. I'm going to summarize the all funds. But first, we have a summary. Personal services is the largest category, and it always is in our budgets. This budget is $41 million with an increase of $369,000, which is about 0.9% over last year's. And probably this is one of the biggest reasons this happened is we did not, in this budget, we do not have the Tom, help me out, the incentive the
Right,
employee, what do we call it? Merit pay. We don't have merit pay.
program.
And that's one of the reasons why this is not down, because it does include potentially a 2.5% increase for an annual salary increase. Workers' compensation increased by $127,000 or 38.9%. Healthcare costs for employees increased by $265,000 or 6.4%. The important thing to remember is that we're partially self-insured, which sometimes if there's bad things that happen, we have to pay for that in real time. Engineering inspections increased by $100,000 or 16.7%. This has been happening for the past few years just because we're busy with construction, but also things happening in our right-of-ways, like laying of fiber optics and things like that. Do we really see that slowing down, Bill? No.
Not for the foreseeable future.
No. We also have in this budget a $2 million contribution from the general fund to the capital fund, and this is really to offset the replacement of the city hall and the library roofs, which are in need to be replaced. There are no new staff positions in this budget. There may have been a few changes between departments, but no new ones have been created. Public safety expenditures are $3.3 million, increased by $403,000 or 1.2%. Okay, so all funds, citywide revenues. This always occurs the same. 38% of that is through taxes, about $139,000, almost $138,000 million, excuse me, $139 million. We also have charges for services, which is 37% of the revenues, and that's about $51 million. And then we have some other things which are very typical, such as fines, forfeitures, interest and rents, other grants, licenses and permits, state revenue sharing, and then some local contributions. So what are the citywide expenditures? Once again, personal services is always on the high end, 38% of it, $58 million. And then other charges and services about $55.7 million. This is where I turn it over to Tom Darling.
Oh, okay. Good evening. Ready to crunch some numbers? All right, let's do this then. All right, let's talk about all funds taxable value. As you can see from the chart here, we're starting in 2010. This is close to one of the high water marks. You can see the effects then of the Great Recession, if you will, from 2008. And we're slowly climbing a slow climb back. We're still not quite to the same level that we had in 2010. Total taxable value is $5.1 billion. That's an increase of about $223 million or 4.6%. Now, we don't collect on that whole $5 million because guess what? We have TIFs. DDAs and BRAs and LDFAs that capture part of that. Really, we capture on about on the 4.9 million that you see there. So that 4.9 million increased about 210 million or about 4.4%. So it's still down, as I said, about 364 million compared to the 2010 levels. Again, right, this is only one side of the formula when we want to talk about tax revenues. The other side then are the millage rates. So let's go ahead and focus on the 1920 rate. Now this is a little bit different than you have in your books because I got some fresh numbers from Nino who got through this board of reviews. Again, you know, this is a working document and it's changing, and so the final will have what I think are going to be these numbers in here, which are pretty final. Well, at least being proposed, let's put it that way. Well, I'm not going to say that they're final. But it should be noted that we did have a heavy rollback of about 0.0528 mils. So if you look at that, compared to that, that's 0.0528 mils, which we take this reduction for us from a practical standpoint out of the capital fund and out of the library fund. Okay? So the cost of the rollback for the city as a whole was about $262,000 of opportunity cost because of the heavy rollback for just this year. Okay, if we took the heavy rollback from our 8.1 mils that were authorized by charter, would be these two right here, we really reduced the millage by 0.2104 mils or about $1,047,000 a year. and reduced tax revenues because of the heavy rollbacks. Okay? It should be noticed on this thing that in total, bar the heavily rollback, that we're not proposing an increase in millage, but we are proposing to redirect 0.02 mils from the debt service millage into the refuge millage service. And we need to do that. We'll talk more about that, I think, on issue night. But the idea is that, you know, after the single stream recycling and stuff, it looks like we need to do, or at least address something to make it feasible and sustainability into that fund. So again, we're not proposing to increase the total, but we are proposing to redirect perhaps some of the millage in the way that we allocate that. It should also be noted, a couple things, that you can see that the debt service millage does fall off in 2022, right? And it should also be noted that this library millage is only for discussion purposes, right? We have not passed the library millage for 2022, nor would we. And when I do propose the appropriations that you'll be passing on May 6th, it will not include an appropriation, a millage appropriation for the library fund for 2022. Okay, let's go on and talk about then the taxes. Again, the total tax for an average residential bill is going to be about $4,600. That includes schools, counties, all the stuff. It's about $4,600. Of that, only $274 is related to the city. In other words, only about 28% of somebody's total tax bill is because of the city services that we provide. So the other, again, we got about 28%, so the other 73%, as I said, it goes to the schools and the county. We can't talk about all funds without talking about legacy costs. Okay? And so let's go through where we're at. We're in good shape all in all, but let's go through each one as we can. For the volunteer firefighter incentive program, what we had budgeted for the contribution was about $1.3 million. Now I'm going to say this once, the unfunded actuarially accrued liability, the UAAL, is $8.8 million. In other words, if you wanted to have this thing 100% funded, it cost $8.8 million today. Again, we fund these over a 25 to 30 year period, and that's fine. That's what we need to do. That's why we had the actuaries tell us how much we have to put in. Retiree health care, the contribution budgeted for the 2020 fiscal year is about $5.6 million. The UAAL is about $59.1 million. If you remember, we're somewhere in the 50% range funded for the retiree health care fund. So we're head and shoulders above the rest. And one of the reasons why a lot of communities aren't funded is because you didn't have to fund it. Back, for several years, right? They didn't start funding these things till there was a law that allowed us to put money away to fund it. And that didn't happen until 2000 with PA 149. So obviously that, and associated with the rising healthcare costs, we've seen, right, our healthcare is going up nearly 7%, and that's not unusual. So that's how you get there. And then the good news is the pension fund is 100% funded. In fact, it's 120% funded today, right, as we speak. So our contribution for those benefits is zero, and we have no UUAL, which should be UAAL. I'll have to talk to the finance director on that. Let's go ahead and talk about the general fund. Okay, so let's throw some big bunch of numbers at you, but let's see if we can't peel this down a little bit. Let's just talk about 2020 here, this column right here. Total general fund revenue is about $63 million. That's about $808,000 more than what we budgeted in 2019. That's about a 1.3% increase. Of course, a big part of that are taxes. Our taxes, again, are $34.3 million, which represents about 54% of all of our revenues, and that increased about $1.4 million or 4.3%. Total general fund expenditures are 63.86%. I don't want to talk about that in a minute. Excuse me. Total general fund expenditure is $65.8 million. Of that, $63.86 million are our core expenditures, what we do, right? provide public safety, general government, recreation, the service we provide, is being budgeted at $63.8 million. This is actually down $100,000 compared to the prior year, or about 0.16%. And it's really a lot of it's related to professional and contractual services that we were able to at least reduce a little bit for the upcoming fiscal year. Transfers of the $2 million, I think City Manager Miller referred to earlier, was a transfer that we plan to help to the capital projects fund to help offset the cost of the City Hall and library roofs that we'll talk more about when we get to the capital fund. Again, the only other thing I'd like to point out on this is we see our 2019 budget. When we budgeted, we thought we'd have a shortfall of about $3.4 million. Our current estimates say that we're actually going to have a surplus of about $300,000. So again, it shows what management's been able to do over the 2019 fiscal year to try and manage our funds, basically, the best we can. So let's go ahead and see how this policy does affect unassigned fund balance. As you know, we have a policy out there that thou shalt have between 30% and 20% of the annual expenditures in unassigned fund balance. And if it isn't the case, then the city manager needs to provide a plan. And this is demonstrating that the budget is serving as a plan to get us back into that range. You can see at the end of 2019, we're estimating that we're going to be just a little north of the 30%. And with the 2020 budget, we should be coming in under the 30%. And 2021 gets us pretty close to the 2020 to the 20%. And then it looks like we're a little south of the 20% based on the 2022 budget. What does that mean? I do not project, I'm budgeting that we will be under that 20%, but I don't project that we will. What this means to me and what it should mean to you is some work that we need to do in the next couple of years to shore up 2022. Okay. Again, let's talk about the general fund revenues. Again, total general fund's about $63 million. Of that, 54% or $34.28 million is generated by taxes. The next largest category will be charges for services, generating about $9 million or about 14%. And then finally, state shared revenues coming in about $8 million or generating about 13% of general fund revenues. Let's talk about general fund expenditures. Again, we're budgeting about $66 million in total general fund expenditures. By far, our largest expenditure is in the area of public safety, both police, fire, and building inspections, at a cost of about $35.3 million. Next, general government is about $9 million, or about 14%. And then finally, our recreation department costs about, we're budgeting about $8 million, or about 13% of our general fund expenditures. So speaking of $35 million, or 53% of our general fund expenditures related to public safety, I think it might be a great segue into our outstanding police department.
Good afternoon, Mayor, council members. There's no significant changes to the police budget. 86% of our budget is personnel costs, so I was going to go into our personnel and things that we do. So our day-to-day operations, just a reminder that we are 24/7, 365-day-a-year police department with weekends, holidays. Our patrol shifts, you can see they're starting the day. They get information from their supervisor to go out and start, and they get information where extra patrols are requested and areas of concern that they need to patrol in their areas. We have our communications and lockup. It's police service aides that staff that. They're non-sworn civilians. They do an excellent job. Of course, it's 24/7. And also for Clawson PD, as a source of revenue, we do their dispatch and also for their lockup. Our in-service training is second to none. Our officers are all highly trained, which really helps for litigations and lawsuits because they do all the training necessary, de-escalation, everything that's needed. So we're very proud of that. Our front desk attendants, a lot of them are retired officers. So they have the skill, knowledge, and ability but they're part-time persons, so we get that benefit. And also in our lobby are volunteers meeting and greeting our citizens, so that really helps out. Next, we have some teams and units within the department. You can see we like acronyms. So we have CIU, Criminal Information Unit, SIU, Special Investigations Unit, and Directed Patrol Unit. Our CIU does all the forensics on computers and smartphones, and they also get the information to SIU and DPU for surveillance and targeting for arrests. So what's really good about that is we're able to be more proactive as opposed to being just reactive when going out and getting criminals. Here's some of our units: K-9 unit, evidence techs, honor guard, and our tactical support team. I did mention to Kurt, I need to update it, but that is me right there. So I had to leave that in. What's important about this is everyone in the department, first and foremost, is a police officer. These are all just secondary jobs, so they take on the additional work and responsibilities of handling these, and I really appreciate it. I'm very proud of our men and women. Last there you see our traffic safety unit. They do a great job in, when people call in, we get a lot of calls for service for speeders in the subdivision, running stop signs, not stopping for school buses. So they're out there doing that. Right now they've been very busy helping out on I-75 with road closures and accidents and all that good stuff. Part of that also is a motor carrier unit, and they've been very busy doing frost law enforcement, and that really saves taxpayers in the city money because those heavy trucks aren't on the roads tearing them up with in the understructure of the roads. Now the next one, education prevention programs. We had 157 community outreach programs which reached over 28,600 people. Some things I'd like to point out is, go to the right page, is one in the middle, stop human trafficking. That's a very timely topic. Our officers go around educating the public on human trafficking, what to look out for, to notify us. And we also use Directed Patrol Unit and officers that do compliance checks on all the massage facilities to make sure none of this type of thing is going on. We have a drug take back. Not only do we have events to do that, but also in our lobby we have a box to take back prescription drugs so people aren't flushing them into our waterways or little hands getting on them in cabinets that nobody's using anymore, the drugs. We have Hope Not Handcuffs. That's a really good one. People can come into the lobby that are addicted to either drugs, alcohol, or prescription medications, and be able to, if they have a misdemeanor warrant or something else, not worry about being arrested, that we can get them into the help that they need, so they're not in that vicious cycle of constantly being just arrested and then released back out. Try to get them the help that they need. The only other one, let's see, we got John Julian up there speaking about active shooter situations. We have not only him, but other officers educating at places of worship, schools, and businesses, so helping make our community safer. The next one's community outreach, which strengthens relationships. This has a lot to do with social media, and we all know, like, when something goes on in the police department, we need to get the information out. We have such a great following, it's so easy to get it out, but we're also able to get feedback from concerned citizens, so it's a two-way street. Our Twitter increased almost 500% in followers in 2018 with an average of 1 million impressions per month. And our Facebook increased 75% in followers. Many have said it has to do with the cat. I disagree.
The cat?
So not only does the social media, we strengthen relationships with the schools, businesses, our residents, and places of worship, but up here we also have some real popular events. We have Coffee with the Cop, Shop with the Cop, our open house, our ride-along program, our internship, and our Citizen Police Academy. Right here is myself and Captain Redmond loading up the back of the vehicle with canned goods and food and supplies and gifts during the holiday season to needy homes in Troy. So, thanks, Bob. This is the last slide. This is some partnerships, local, state, and federal. You see a lot of the different patches here for the different law enforcement agencies that we work with. This helps extend our training dollar. We learn best practices by working with them. And we have additional resources when there is a major event. And when there is a major event, we're working with people that we know, so it's a smoother process because of those relationships that we built throughout the year. Not only with law enforcement, but with hospitals, businesses, and community organizations. You can see the Somerset Collection we have officers at. We have Beaumont. We work heavily with the school district. Troy Community Coalition, for the prevention of drug and alcohol abuse is very important. And our Citizens on Patrol, I'm very proud of. Our volunteers go out into the residential neighborhoods. They're our eyes and ears. They report back to us. They also help us all over within the station and at our front desk. So kudos to them. Really appreciate that. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
I asked the police chief if he would do my program, and he said he would. He would just do it in two things. He would say that we're doing a great job for reasonable cost. Maybe I should come up and talk a little bit more. Council, you know the makeup of the fire department, but maybe for some of the audience or people at home watching, I just want to review what really makes our fire department so unique. And we're considered a combination style fire department, primarily volunteer. So we're roughly 163 volunteers currently out of our allotment of 180, and we have 11 uniform career staff, 12 with our civilian secretary. So we've got 175 people, which makes us the largest department in Oakland County and the largest combination volunteer department in the state of Michigan. So by comparison, if you look at other departments that maybe compare in size, Sterling Heights, Southfield, Rochester Hills, primarily career departments, and you can see with their budget and the number of people and stations that they have, we're again the largest department, and we operate at a fraction of that cost. So it's amazing that we've been doing this, and we've grown with the city. We're in our 79th year as the fire department. Started out as a volunteer department with one station at the village of Big Beaver, and then it slowly expanded. And I get calls all the time, and people ask, how does Troy do it with a volunteer fire department? Well, we've grown with the city. That's given us an advantage, and then also with our staff supporting the volunteers and the training that we do. It's been very successful. Knock on wood. So some of our planned operating costs, like anything, it costs to operate a department. But some of our bigger purchases this coming fiscal year are going to be the Hearst extrication equipment. So you've all heard of the Jaws of Life. So what we have now are heavy tools, and they're hydraulically two-cycle engine operated. They do a great job, but they sometimes limit us as to what we can do to get to the scene, to get to the patient. So new technology has afforded us the ability to have the same capabilities, but to use electric over hydraulic, so basically battery-operated equipment. So a lot more portability, a lot quieter to work at the scene, and it'll be a lot more efficient for us to work at those physical rescues that we're called to do sometimes at traffic crashes. Our thermal imaging cameras, we've had those for a number of years, and the technology has changed. Similar with the Hearst equipment, that the cameras are a lot smaller now, better battery life, better display, so it makes it a lot easier for firefighters to use these in a fire environment where it's very smoky, we can't see, and it helps us locate any victims or any hidden fire and things like that. Our contractual and services and computer maintenance, some of the costs are software applications. Like any operation, we're really becoming reliant on computer and software applications. And so we're planning on purchasing some of those applications to help us with our inspections and pre-planning, as we're required to do by law. Department training and tracking, which helps us with our ISO ratings, so that we can show exactly how much training we're doing. And our fire reporting, which we're required to do by the feds, the National Fire Incident Reporting System, we have to do that. So every time there's a fire run, the fire stations have to fill out a report, and new software makes that a lot easier for them and gives us better reporting capabilities. And then, of course, our emergency fire dispatch. We pay for software, and we renew that license for that software every year, so that the dispatch center can process calls, anything related to a fire that needs a fire department. Every call taker can theoretically process that call in the same way, so that the proper equipment is dispatched, and it's dispatched in the most efficient and timely manner. So So out of our proposed operating budget, which is about $5.5 million, that includes, as Tom mentioned earlier, just almost a $1.3 million toward the volunteer incentive plan. So as City Manager Miller read in the beginning, that's strategy number 8, which in part says sustainability of the plan. So we contribute a certain amount every year, and it's planned for a little over $1 million this year. Just a reminder, that also includes a little over $500,000 for EMS. So we have a contract with Alliance Mobile Health. They're doing a great job. They have, if you read the annual report, they're meeting their response time requirements. And having a private EMS do our work, that saves the city the cost and the burden of having to do that ourselves, whether it's the fire department or the police department. So you can see the fire department's budget was a little under 2% less than last year. We were able to save some of that in some of the service charges and administration and fire companies, fire prevention, fire halls, and some of our operating or repair and maintenance costs. So how do you put value on the fire department? And Mark asked me this earlier, how do you measure how good the fire department's doing? Chief Nelson used to say jokingly, if you go outside and you look in 4 directions and don't see any smoke, we must be doing a good job. So there is some truth to that. But we like to measure our operating efficiency, and as you can see in the chart, at least over the last 5 years, we average about a 97% operating efficiency. And so what does that mean? Basically, we take the value of property that's threatened by fire and the amount of estimated property that was lost due to a fire, and whatever's left is what we save. So, you hear stories jokingly about volunteer fire departments saving basements. Well, we save more than a basement. We save about 97% of whatever's involved in fire, and this is related to building fires. So we have a proactive fire prevention and education program, not to the level that the police department has, but we do get out in the community, we get out in the schools, we try to prevent fires, and overall we have a very low fire rate for a city this size. We're about 1,100 calls, and a little less than half of those are structure related, and out of those probably a half a dozen is what we call working fires, where we have to go to work to put the fire out. And we're still in an ISO Class 3 fire department, but as you've heard me say, we're still working toward that Class 2, and some of those software applications and some of the tracking that we're able to do and some of the training that we're able to do to get our people trained and certified is going to help us gain those points that we need to get to the level 2. At least that's the point. And again, it's a significant annual savings to the city.
Good evening. I just want to start by saying we're not responsible for the snow. We didn't order the snow. We didn't want the snow either. However, we do respond to the snow, and we did last night. Not a whole lot of changes in the Public Works, and we're going to concentrate on the Streets and Drains Division within the Public Works this year in the budget. Just a reminder that we do budget about $750,000 towards local road snow removal, and the way the policy is written right now that council adopted is that's a 4 inches over or more and requires freezing conditions. Troy has about 250 miles of residential streets that requires us to use contractors to assist us in the removal of those local roads. That cost is included in that $750,000. That is essential for us to be able to achieve our goal to get those 6 inches or below snow events done within 24 hours. And I'm glad to say that all this past winter, the winter before that, we were able to accomplish that. County and major roads, Troy is unique that we do snow removal and ice control on county roads. The county does contribute just under $300,000 towards that effort. Depends on the winter whether that covers the cost or not. In the past it has, sometimes it hasn't. We budget $1.1 million. Most of that cost is in salt. We do spread a lot of salt on those major roads to make sure that they're safe. And we base that budget on assuming that there's 34 occurrences within a year when the police department or during the normal business hours when we dispatch crews out to those major roads. Drains is the other side of the Streets and Drains divisions. Recently, the state of Michigan has developed what's called the MS4 permit. It looks at drainage and the waters, the storm water that enters into our lakes, rivers, and streams. And it has put some additional restraints and constraints on the Streets Division. It requires us to look at all of our inlets. And some of an example of an inlet is what you see Matt there doing is cleaning out a catch basin. That's an inlet that will eventually end up into our lakes and streams. So we're going through a process on how to record those cleanings and how to record, if we see any illicit discharges and things like that. Retention ponds and rear yard drains budgeted at $640,000. Troy is also unique that we offer that service to our residents. Most cities do not maintain the rear yard drains in the houses behind the home. So we are a little unique in that, and we try to get those as efficiently as we can. And then retention ponds as well. The city maintains approximately 160 retention ponds throughout the city of Troy. That includes, going and inspecting, making sure that they're working properly. Some of them have pump stations that have to lift the water so they can gravity flow down, and mowing the grass and clearing the snow on the sidewalks in the wintertime.
Good evening, everybody. I was asked to do a brief presentation. This is really hard to put the Recreation Department in 2 slides. We have a total of 7 full-time staff. I want to emphasize that 87% of our workforce is part-time. It becomes really complicated wage-wise when you look what minimum wage is doing in today's workforce. I consolidated our primary work functions in the different populations that we serve. We concentrate at the community center a lot on fitness, swim lessons, a lot of the senior citizen programs, enrichment. We have art classes, pottery. We have a licensed rainbow preschool program under our roof, youth and adult athletics, and obviously our administration area for registering for programs. Other services that aren't always so obvious to people that we have in our building. New since last May is a DMC physical therapy clinic, which is doing really well, by the way. We also have our medical offices in the building. Our Meals on Wheels program, which provides thousands of meals every day for homebound seniors. We have their offices, the food prep area, and also the delivery out of our building. You can do park shelter reservations and special use for the parks, even though we're the recreation division. We communicate that with field usage for all the youth sports groups in the city, including baseball and soccer with the parks division. We work closely with them in probably at least a weekly basis, if not almost daily, throughout the summer and spring. Also, we take a lot of different memberships to the aquatic center and dog parks.
Thank you. So now we're going to switch over to the capital fund, and I have one slide. The thing about capital is that we have a lot of needs, and we can't fund all those needs, obviously, and there's hard decisions that always have to be made. And our capital millage rate is at 1.3896, I believe, and there is a major local streets transfer of an additional $5.7 million. We're making a recommendation to transfer funds from the general fund to cover outstanding needs from the capital plan and to build up a fund balance for future projects. That is $2 million from the general fund, is primarily for the 2 roofs at the library and the city hall. One thing that, just a quick observation, I think what we're going to really notice is when I-75 construction gets done, and we do our road maintenance, and Bill will get into a little bit more reconstruction. We're going to stay away from I-75. When the dust clears, we're going to notice that we're really going to have to really invest in our roads because they're going to be heavily used, and we're not going to be working on them. Tom?
Great, thanks. So let's go back to crunching some numbers then. Let's go ahead and concentrate again on 2020. We budgeted revenues at about $15.7 million. You can see less than half of this comes from our tax revenues, right? The remaining is coming from transfers. Basically, the 7.7 million of this 8.8 is from transfers. Again, we talked about how heavily affected the capital projects fund as far as taxes go. You can see that's on the revenue side of it. On the expenditure side of it, we budgeted about 14.1 million. You can see this is significantly less than what we've been doing in the prior years, right? We've been doing 19 million and 17, 18 million in 2018. So going down to about 14.4 million is a strategy that Mark talked about. It kind of is working together. You know, we had a building assessment, and we know that we have to invest some money back into these buildings. So we thought this would be a good time to do it, right, while they're doing I-75, because we are going to slow down on some of the road work for a couple years while they're doing that. What that does then is we're going to help us build up some fund balance so that after I-75 is done, you know, we may have some additional funds, right, that we'll have to channel back in the roads to get them back to the way we want them. Okay? So let's look at how that works. So here's fund balance. Again, back in, you know, in the early 2000 or around 2010, we probably had about $18 to $20 million of fund balance, and we've been bringing it down for the last several years. I've only got 17 here. But the idea is, like I said, is we're trying to build up some fund balance if we can, back up to about the $14 million level. Rather we, you know, it would be a great thing if we get done with I-75, and guess what, the roads are great. We still need to build up some capital, right, because you know the picture's going to come around again where we need to invest significant dollars in our roads. And so that's kind of how a capital fund works, right? You build up some road, and then you spend it and do it. And then you build it up again if you can. So that's at least the what's proposed in this budget is the strategy in this budget. Okay, so it shows a build up of fund balance by about 13.5 million by the end of 2022, we're hoping, while at the same time doing roofs and other capital. Again, total capital projects fund revenues is 15.7 million, again primarily from taxes and transfers. Of the transfers, 4.5 million comes from major and local streets, and 2 million of it's coming from the general fund. Capital projects, again, even though we're slowing down on our streets, it's still our major expenditure out of the capital projects fund. We're still investing, you know, $6.5 million or 45% of available revenues into our streets. The next thing is, as we said, is the building improvements. It's budgeted at about 4.3 million, or about 30% of total capital fund expenditures that are in the budget.
Thanks, Tim. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about capital budget versus capital needs. Our roads budget is about $6.5 million, but if we look more closely at our actual needs, we need about $89 million to bring our local roads up to good, $19 million for major roads, $26 million for industrial. So that's a total of $134 million to bring everything into good condition. But what our city engineer would say, you really don't ever want to do everything all at once. First, you can't afford it. Second, you can't find the contractors to do it. You phase it out. Obviously, we would like a little bit more to bring more into good condition. We can't do it all at one time. And regarding the facilities budget, in this one we have about $4.3 million, but we have needs $14 million for physical improvements over 30 years, $7 million for site improvements also over 30 years, for a total of $21 million in capital needs in the long term. So this budget, we have in capital, we have $2.4 million for City Hall and library roofs, $240,000 for gun range improvements, $900,000 for, I've heard so much controversial ways to say this, SCBA tanks, $900,000. And what's happening there is that the tanks are being they're decertified, they're too old, they need to be replaced. We have about $150,000 for CO2 and NO2 detection at Public Works, $55,000 for restrooms at Firefighters Park, and $6.5 million for major and local roads.
What would a budget presentation be if I were not here to talk about roads? I just got one slide, so Mark mentioned 6.5 million, 2.5 million of that is locals, about 4 million is majors. The map there shows 2020, which is kind of the greenish color. It looks yellowish up here, but it's kind of that color. Does not show is local road concrete slab replacement, which is $1 million out of the 2.5 million in locals budgeted for the next 2 years. But everything else you can look to see out for the future years. And as mentioned a couple times, this is a smaller program than what we've had in the past. But when I looked at the budget this year, the basic premise I went by was we need to stay off the roads. I-75, and everybody says, well, it's not bad. Well, they haven't taken lanes yet on the major roads. Big Beaver's going to go down to one lane here. Don't know, but things like that are going to change traffic patterns. So really all we've got coming up, we've got John R. that's already under construction because that's got federal dollars in it. And then we're going to piggyback on 2 large county-wide programs. One is a maintenance overlay program on Adams. You're going to see an agreement coming on that shortly. And then a slab replacement program that they've got, and we're going to piggyback on that for slab work on DeQuinder. So we're trying to stay out of the middle, essentially. Part of the problem is I-75 cuts through the heart of the city, so it's pretty tough to avoid it. We're doing the best we can. North Hill Parkway, this map goes a little long. We're actually going to be kind of just north of Whitfield, so we're going to take off from where the current concrete ends, get up to that Whitfield point, put in new concrete, and then we'll finish that up next year. Our local roads, we're trying to kind of stay same concept. An area like this, which at one time was proposed, that's going to see a lot of traffic when Big Beaver's down. So we kind of had to juggle the local road program to try and get to areas where we don't think we're going to get as much impact from the redistribution of traffic.
No, on the face of it, it looked like Adams Road might really impact the overall traffic, but could you expand upon
that? What this is originally the county, their maintenance program included south of Big Beaver, so Birmingham city limits up to Wattles. And I said, hey, can we jump onto that program and include Wattles to Long Lake? Because we just did this piece. That piece has got federal funds in 2021. I said, we could finish all of Adams if we can get that piece. And they said, sure, why not? So what we can do is we're going to use tri-party funds. It's about 240 grand, but we pay a third of it. So we're going to get almost 2 miles done for $80,000.
But it'll be done really quick, though.
Yeah, the maintenance overlay program, they pretty much clean the road, tack it, and pave it. And what they say is a week to 2 weeks per mile. They got about 90 miles that they're going to do in the county. It's about a $52 million contract. So what we also see is we see a benefit of a low cost because of the volume of work that they're doing. Same thing with the concrete. We're going to put in 340 some odd thousand into that program, and they're going to do slabs. And I told them, I said, we're all in on that as long as you're not spending money on the Sterling Heights side. You got to stay west of the center line.
So Bill, I'm going back to Adams Road. What's the downside of that method that they use?
Nothing.
Well, it doesn't live very long.
No, it's not a structural improvement, but a road like Adams where you don't have a ton of truck traffic, you've got more residential traffic, and you've got lower volumes per se on that road than a lot of the others. When we get further to the north, you're getting more into the 75 traffic. You're getting a little heavier volumes, and that's where you're going to see, we've got federal dollars with the county. So those are a little bit heavier projects. As you go south, traffic kind of lightens up, and a maintenance overlay is an appropriate fix there.
How long does that stay good for?
It depends, 10 to 12, something like that.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
80 grand.
Yeah. And then one of the things I didn't even notice till I was putting this map together. So in about 7 years, we're going to have done rehab, reconstruct, overlay, concrete slab replacements on every border road of the city. It's about 18 miles that we're going to do. And that started in 2016. So in about 7 years, ending in 23. Because these 2 projects have federal funds in them, those are going to be done after 75. So they're going to get beat up. They're in rough shape now, but we know after 75 is done, we can come in and fix them up. But that's pretty incredible. Since 2016, we'll have touched every perimeter road in the city, and not including like Maple, but the primary corridors. And that will, we've not used city funds on any 1 mile exclusively. There's been federal dollars, there's been tri-party, there's been road commission. Sterling Heights, Rochester Hills has been involved, and Madison Heights will be involved in the 14-mile project. So all of that, it all reduces our costs so we can stretch our dollars and do more roads. So it's been wonderful partnerships with our neighbors and the agencies that around us, and we've been able to parlay money that you guys have put aside into additional funds. And that's really the biggest thing that when I look at it is, how can I use somebody else's money?
So as we kind of foreshadowed last year in the budget season, the facility condition assessment had some unknown cost to it, and now we're seeing that and we're dealing with that appropriately. $4.3 million appropriated for the facilities, majority, as mentioned several times, are going to be spent on the roof to the City Hall and the library. The Troy Niles Barnard House, which I know we've had a lot of discussions on, and we will continue that discussion Monday night as one of the issues that we'll talk about. Building access control system, although it wasn't part of the FCA report, we did notice a need to update our security here at City Hall. There's a lot of areas that need to be secured that are currently under traditional key, and when someone leaves or departs from the city, if they don't return that key or we're unable to get that key back, that area becomes unsecure. So we're going to move towards a card reader process where you actually have I'm sure all familiar with a HID card that you can scan in. We can now see who's coming and going, and if that person departs, we can immediately disable their access to City Hall. Some of the other things that were identified in the FCA report were the community center shower tiles, the community center pool marshite. Nature Center Owl Barn was not in the FCA report. That is a request from the Nature Center to assist them and partner with them in building a barn or a structure for their owls, and there is a partnership with that where the Nature Center is contributing some of that cost to that project.
I'm in an elementary school play. Just briefly, what Tom had indicated and Mark indicated, we are replacing our self-contained breathing apparatus. Those are the air packs that firefighters wear to go inside. As Mark said, we can only test and certify those for so many years, and they're reaching their end of life. So we're replacing all of those, about 120 air packs for the whole fire department. The other cost that we've got is tied into the budget amendment that Council just approved a couple weeks ago for the GPS traffic preemption system. So as Bill indicated, traffic isn't so bad now, but as we start narrowing the lanes down, getting to the fire station, getting trucks to the scene, the Opticom is going to help us a lot. And these costs are going to be for the installation costs by the Road Commission for Oakland County.
Thank you for this chart, Tom.
Yes, let's go over this in detail. I only have this up here for illustrative purposes, and what I'm trying to illustrate here is that we just don't come up with a proposed water or sewer rate. We go through a detailed analysis of costs. If you remember, we did this exercise together a couple years ago. So what I would like to point out, if we left current rates the same, we'd have a decrease in working capital, basically outflows more than inflows, of about $4 million, okay? We are proposing about a 3% increase to the water rate, but we would still have about a 3.5% yes. What's that? Shortfall, thank you. But at this point, I'm not too worried about that because you can see we got about $6.2 million in capital projects for that year. We're typically about the $2 to $3 million range, so I'm thinking in the long term that would keep us about even going forward. Same thing with the sewer rates. If we kept the rates at the current rates, we'd have a shortfall or a decrease, and really I shouldn't use shortfall, a working capital decrease, because this is cash.
Gotcha.
This is cash, about $2.8 million. We are proposing a 2.9% increase. We would still have a shortfall of about $2.4 million, but again, we've got about $3 million in capital, and usually we're doing about $1 million to $2 million a year. So I think over the long term, that's where we need to go. Let's go ahead and look at a history of our rates, because we don't do this, without a lot of thought and consideration. In fact, look at the water rates remain the same for couple years here. We don't increase them very much, as opposed to what the Great Lakes Water Authority and the Oakland County Water Resource Commission does to us. Sewer rates, again, you see we kept them flat for 3 years in here, kept them flat for those 2 years. Again, we don't just do raise rates. We go through a big analysis, and in the long term, at this point, I think we need to do it. With that being said, the average quarterly consumer billing is increasing from estimate of $260 to $267 per quarter, or about $7.80 a bill. And that's combined. So let's go ahead and look at that working capital. Again, that's how we manage it. You know, it has been coming down, and this is, you know, by structure. We thought we could bring it down a little bit, but we're trying to, again, in here, trying to level this off and bring some stability to the water sewer fund, because we don't like issuing debt, right? And so we need to have some cash as we go through and do maintenance and preventive maintenance and restoration as we go forward, so we don't end up having one huge project where we need to go bond a lot of debt and really increase rates to make those bond payments. Same thing with this is a sewer fund working capital. You know, it kind of got built up here, and we've over the years have been bringing this down. Again, I think through 2022 we were getting back down to this $20 million mark, which I think would be sufficient kind of going forward. And that's how we kind of budget the rates. Kurt?
So rates are important, and when we look at our neighbors, we want to see how we compare to our neighbors, and I'm happy to say even with the proposed rate increase, we're still doing very well when we compare to similar sized cities. Tom did use 3.9 MCS for his analysis. We did something a little different here just to equalize it, because every community bills a little differently. They have ready to service fees in there, but so we standardize that across the board, and when we look at rates, we're doing rather well. Thanks. And probably most importantly, our quality of water. As you know, we purchase from the Great Lakes Water Authority, and lead and copper are a big concern, and we're proud here in the city of Troy to be able to say that our lead and copper levels are lower than, not even close to the call for action threshold. And we do additional testing now with some state mandates where we have to test about 80 households, where before we were only doing about 30. So we're even increasing our testing to make sure we're well below that call for action threshold. Reliability, our main breaks went up a little bit last calendar year compared to 2017, but we're still well below our neighbors as far as main breaks. We invest a lot into our infrastructure, which keeps those main breaks low. One thing that you'll notice in the capital maps is the reliability, the addition of that connection to the Great Lakes Water Authority and Beach and South Boulevard. That's going to provide additional redundancy in the event that something happens with Great Lakes Water Authority. We can still supply our residents with good pressure, quality water, where we don't have to issue boil water alerts and things like that, like we've seen in the past where Great Lakes Water Authority has some significant breaks in very large mains.
Thank you, Kurt. Well, that's the end of our presentation, except for another slide, which will kind of summarize what we're going to do Monday. This is where council gets to ask questions.
Thank you, Mark. As some genius once told me, it's just a matter, we're given money that we have to spend, how do you want to spend it? It's basically how it boils down. So, and of course, we want to do that the best way that we possibly can, use the money and be fiscally responsible to the residents and the businesses that give us those funds. So, try to be orderly here. Councilman Hamilton, you want to start? And we'll work our way around the table here if you have any questions at this point. Just in the past, Mark, you're setting aside Monday for issues.
Issues and answer questions.
So if there's an issue that a council member wants to have discussed, now's the time to bring that up for Monday.
Yes.
Correct?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much for all the hard work, all that you've done. I'm the newest council member. I'm still trying to learn as much as I can. I'm sorry I have pages and pages of questions I've asked, and I hope you all see the responses here, but I'm trying to get a sense of the history here of our budget and everything. So just from what I saw, one question I had is I saw how the general fund balance is kind of going down for the next 3 years. And my one question is in 2021 to 2022, does that include having to allocate library money towards the library because the library millage is disappearing? Or is that fund balance going down to 17%, not even accounting for that, which would imply it would get even lower?
Thank you. That's a great question. And yes, there is, it wouldn't affect the general fund. It's the capital projects fund that is making up some shortfall for their capital. Again, as I pointed out earlier, the 2022 is really for illustrative purposes.
Right.
Yeah. How the library fund, there is shortfall, and as you can see, the library is really budgeted to be done by 2022 under the current model. It only really affects the capital fund. It does not affect the general fund.
So in reality, we have another $3 million or maybe $2.5 million shortfall because we'd lose that millage. We'd have to allocate general fund money to the library in 2022 fiscal year.
And
right.
And it is an issue for Monday, not necessarily for any specific action, but just to inform you where it's going, and because the millage doesn't.
Right, yeah, I just saw that, I just wanted to clarify that. But
yeah, absolutely.
It's remarkable how much our city does for essentially $100 a month per the average resident. And I was looking through the numbers, and really if you look at someone who owns and keeps a property from last year to this year, their tax rate's only going up 1.8% because of the cap, because of inflation on taxable value, and then the heavily rollback of 0.05 on top of that. So you're only paying about $20 more from this year to last year for the average resident. It's amazing what $100 a month can get you in the city of Troy.
Yes. I think that's a great summary. And it's one thing I think that council struggles with every budget is that we've been so fiscally responsible with the money, but yet we're getting to a point where we're losing money every year. And it's sooner or later it's going to catch up to us. And I think 2020 is going to be the start of it. So I think the council really needs to recognize that to be responsible, there are some hard decisions that are going to have to be made. But Mark, I think it might be important to indicate what are the discussion topics for Monday so that when council should know that we're going to talk about the city transportation services, refuse fund, the Barnard House, the library funding, and aquatic center. So,
but the important point I want to just really note is that we really are seeking specific responses on transportation services, refuse fund, and millage, Niles and Barnard. We're really informing about library funding and the aquatic center. There's no immediate need for those, but they're important things that are going to happen down the road that are going to cost money.
understood, but you know, as Councilman Hamilton said, when we're doing a 3-year outlook, and now we're doing an outlook in year 3 that includes the library, it's misleading to take a look at 2022 today and say that the funding is going to be there, because I disagree that it only has an effect on the general fund or the capital fund. I think it has an effect on the entire budget, because you have to if it doesn't get renewed, you either have to get that money somewhere, or you have to close the library again. So here we are 5 years later, once again talking about what we talked about 5 years ago.
Exactly.
So, I think it's a discussion that we certainly need to have on Monday. Maybe not tonight, but I think when you look at your projections in 2022, it's going to have an effect on everything, in my opinion.
I don't disagree. The 2022 budget for the library, again, is only for illustrative purposes. And maybe in the final document, I'll highlight that, maybe more than I have in this draft. Because we went through this a few years ago, right? But from a planning and strategic point, we want to budget as a going concern, right? At least to kind of give us an idea of what that would look like, even though we can't, address whether it got, a millage passes to begin it or not. We can still, at least from a strategic point, put it out there as if it was a going concern so that we can see what that looks like. Yes, if the idea that it doesn't pass and that we were going to somehow try and fund that through general fund, that would be a whole different story.
Councilwoman Hoderick, did you have questions?
Yeah, talking about the local roads, Mr. Hootery, I think the plan to cut back so that traffic can flow on what we're doing makes absolute sense. And I'm hearing you say that we're going to be doing local roads, which in my resident terminology means neighborhood roads.
Yeah, subdivisions.
Subdivisions. I think we might get questions on that. Oh, are you going to keep, does this allow for more work in subdivisions? And
No, because Tom mentioned, and we in total, roads are going to be slightly reduced. So I think there's been a reduction in asphalt, what we call asphalt pavement overlay in the residential areas, as well as concrete slabs. For the next 2 years, they've been reduced by $1 million, kind of twofold. One, to free up some capital for facilities, but at the same time, knowing that there's only certain areas that we really want to be in. So why don't we take this opportunity to pump some capital back, give something back. You guys have given a lot to local roads and roads in general over the past 7 years. We spent a lot of money to get them into the condition they're at. So, but we don't want to put that off too long because we know the roads deteriorate. Change your oil now or change your engine later. You guys have all seen that chart before.
Yeah.
so we're at a place where we can ride that out.
We are, and I guess to me, when you talk about like pavement management, theoretical and asset management, it all comes down to right fix at the right time.
Right.
So what do you want to do? If a road has failed, and a road that fails that's concrete is much different than a road that's failed in asphalt. Because what we use is called pacer rating, so it's a visual, more or less. We've got consultants that go out, they get trained every year and drive the roads and come up with a numerical value. That comes back in, we put it into, the GIS person puts it into the program, and engineering and DPW, we physically go out and look at roads, drive them. Kurt's got staff that they drive, I'll drive, Kurt will drive, and we're all like, well, that one doesn't really look good, that one. So we kind of verify what it is that we're looking at, and what you'll find is an asphalt road that's in poor condition, visually, if you're looking at it, it looks, there's lots of cracks, and there may be some kind of a little bit displacements, but it doesn't ride that bad. The normal person driving through a sub is like, well, why are you going to fix that road? It's not that bad. The person that's out doing their lawn out front, looking at the road like, this is horrible. It's the worst road in the city. And I hear that all the time. Why are you not fixing my road? A road that is in poor condition this year is still in poor condition next year. The fix that you would need to do this year is really the same fix you're going to do next year. What we want to do in true asset management theories is to try and apply the right fix at the right time. And what we want to do is catch those roads that are in fair, that could move to poor if we don't do the right fix at the right time. Because now once they've gone to poor, it costs more money. If we can catch them, the pavement deterioration curve is kind of like this. If we can catch them at this point, we can lift them back up. They'll never get back to new, so they'll come back up to here and it'll drop. So we do crack and joint sealing, we do overlays, we do concrete slab replacements. All these things are all different types of fixes. We've tried all kinds of different things. What works, we do. What doesn't, we don't do. But kind of in the end game is what we're trying to do is do that right thing at the right time. And a lot of times if we've got a road that's in poor condition, but it still rides good, it just doesn't look that pretty, we can put it off. And that's some of the stuff we're doing right now. Concrete roads kind of on the opposite side. When a concrete road is failed and in poor condition, usually you've got bad joints, you've got chunks of concrete that are out because every time you hit that, it just keeps, you get water in there and it keeps, that concrete just keeps flaking off. And we can get into hazardous conditions. So I mean, there's a difference between a poor condition road and a road that actually becomes hazardous. And the slab program does a lot more of that kind of, we talked about segment replacements years ago when we were doing some large programs. Kind of a true slab, you're going in and fixing the worst. You're trying to get rid of those areas that kind of are dangerous. They're real abrupt. You're driving down your subdivision street and it's late at night and you hit something and blow out a tire or whatever. You don't see that as much on an asphalt road. And if you get a failure, you just don't get that abrupt. Just a lot to do with pavement and pavement design, that kind of stuff, but you just don't see that same type of failure. So a lot of what we do with asphalt is, it can be done cheaper, but we got about 1/3 of the local roads are asphalt, about 2/3 are concrete in our local road network. So, I mean, and we had dumped a lot of money into concrete, and we kind of, every 10 years or so, we kind of get behind in asphalt, and that's kind of what you see right now, is we're trying to catch back up. We're kind of taking a breather, moving off to the sides, but we're still going to spend $1.5 million on asphalt pavement, so we're still able to do some geographic areas. I-75 passes, we go back and look at a couple of, perfect example to me was I had a project proposed parallel to Big Beaver. Well, that's Heartland. Where are you going to go if Big Beaver's backed up? They go there now. Little Beaver. Imagine your frustration when you try and go through Heartland, drive the speed, stop the stop signs, and they got lanes closed because they're paving. And what I would hear is, who's the genius that came up with this plan that's doing a project on Heartland while their lanes are closed on Big Beaver? Well, I'm the genius. So a lot of that, so it's, to me, that what you see for the 5-year program for locals, majors, you got to give me a little leeway, because year 3, I don't think is going to be what you see there. 1, it'll probably be a larger program, and 2, it'll probably change where we're going to be, because what we want to do, similar to what we're doing with 14 Mile with the county, we know that road's in bad shape. We know it should be done right now. Why would we fix it? Same thing with Stevenson. Why would we fix it now when it's going to get the most traffic it's ever going to see probably for the next 20 years? Same thing with the residential. You get all this additional traffic. Why go in and spend the money? If we truly want to get the life that we expect out of it, if we expect to get 8, 10, 12 years out of these local overlays, spend the money now, put all that I-75 traffic on it, well, you just increase your deterioration by 5-fold. Who knows what the number is, but you could expect it's not going to give you the life you want. So we come in after I-75 is done, do the new PACER ratings, we go out and look at the roads and say, okay, we were right or we were wrong. And we can identify where it is we should target, knowing that we're going to have some of that money coming back in so we can do a larger program. So I think that's what you're going to see. So one of the caveats with that 5-year is, to me, the next year is tight, second year is, it's still pretty accurate. That 3rd year, even without 75, that's where you start getting a little fuzzy, and as you move out, it gets real, the crystal ball kind of gets real foggy.
Okay. I just want to demonstrate that there's wisdom to this.
I think about this quite a bit.
And I know that, and I wanted to hear I wanted to hear you think out loud with us, because I think it's valuable.
Yeah, I think I had sent you guys kind of an email a while back to kind of method to my madness, and some of my notes were not supposed to be sent out, but actually in the end, I'm kind of glad you saw it, because you see what I do. And I mean, the one I did for major roads, because I'm already looking at what do we need to do on major roads. I mean, you got Livernois north of Long Lake, you've got John R. Maple up through north of Big Beaver up by the high school. There's areas in the city that I'm like, and I've already talked, we're meeting with the county tomorrow, and those are on our list for the county. I've already talked to Gary Petrovich, who's the deputy managing director, and we've got plans. Big Beaver out in front of Marriott, and east of Rochester. I mean, we've got some bad pavement out there that is starting to show its age, but it's going to get a ton of traffic. So county's like, well, how about if we look at it in 2020, 2021? Try and get tri-party. We'll try and maybe we can do a 50-50 with the county, trying to see where we can get funds from other sources so that we can do these roads that we need to do. So it's not just looking at what's this next 2 years, it's looking beyond that. Once we get out there, and how do we fund that stuff out in those out years? Because we don't have federal money for it. We widened Big Beaver out front, we didn't have federal dollars for it, but we were told to go get it, and we wouldn't get it. So I mean, there's ways to work within the system of things, whether you can use federal funds. There's lots of rules and lots of hoops to jump through. One of the big things is money, matching money. So if you have the ability to match other people's money, much like getting a loan for anything, if you've got a good enough idea, somebody's going to give you money. Well, if we can match, and especially on a county road, if they can give us 50%, we give them, so we each put in 50, the road gets fixed, Residents are happy, businesses are happy, the county's happy. They don't have to send maintenance out. We've done our job, they've done their job, and it cost us half. Tri-party, a third, all that stuff.
And the other thing he doesn't tell you is he's on the regional road funding committee, so he participates in and influences the regional
I'm
funding.
at this point, I'm kind of a senior member on there, so I actually get calls when people want things. They call me for advice, and they call me, well, would you support this? So, I mean, it does help, and I know the people at the county, I know the people at the state, I know the people at SEMCOG. So I know the channels to travel through and how do you get things done.
How to leverage the dollars.
Yeah, and that, in the end, that's what it is how do I best use our money to do more?
Thank you.
While you're up.
Yeah, I was going to say, before you sit down, let's just see if there's any more questions about, I know that Councilman Henderson asked the question, and so why don't we ask, Councilman Henderson?
Just kudos. It's nice to be able to shift gears when we have such massive projects like I-75. I think that people will appreciate it, and if we tore up all the other roads that we wanted to tear up, they'd be ultra aggravated
And one
in
is
the next
just
couple of years, so good job.
Interruption, but one of the things is I-75 was supposed to happen over 10 years. And they came back after segment 1 was almost done, and they said, guess what? We're going to do it all in 2 years. I'm like, what do you mean you're going to do it? We're going to do all of Troy, 13 miles of Coolidge in 2 years. So we had to take what program we had established already, proposed in the budget, laid out, because we got to coordinate with water main projects, sewer projects, we got to coordinate with our neighbors. I'm like, oh, great. Something to do. I have nothing to do. So that plays into it as well. That acceleration really changed the game. But in the end, that project's going to get done in 2 years rather than 10. And really, it's March to November, and March to November next year. So I mean, you got 8 months of heartache, 8 months of heartache, rather than the same thing repeated for 10 years. So everybody have patience.
And thanks for keeping your eye on the ball on the Coolidge overpass. I know.
Yeah, and I did send some stuff out. I do have correspondence from Walsh Toby. I do have correspondence from MDOT. And I've been pressing them because I'm like, hey, I got to include this in the budget. I'm going to get killed if I don't include this in the budget. Because originally, the argument was, okay, well, we'll just remove and replace what's there. What finally came out is they were going to take the curbs off, leave the pavement. I said, you're killing me here. And I said, we need to widen it. I said, the structure, and we got them to, the structures on I-75, we went through multiple iterations. So we have a master thoroughfare plan, we have a master plan. So luckily, we have that because we were able to provide that to MDOT to justify widening all these structures to provide for wide roads.
Future right-of-way.
Waddles Road, since I've been here, I started when Frank Gerstenecker was here, and he told me we'd never propose a project on Waddles Road. We did one, and that's right at Rochester, I was the only one. But there will come a day when Big Beaver's over capacity and the Waddles will need to be widened. This structure that's going in, theoretically, at least what we're seeing in the plans and what I've been told, will provide for 4 lanes. They wouldn't give me they wouldn't give me a 5th lane because they said, where are you going to turn? I said, okay, I'll take the 4. So after it's built, it's going to be 2 lanes, strike for 2 lanes, but it will be sufficient width to provide for the 4th lane.
Safety paths?
Yes, one side, that one. Most of the other structures are all set up to provide for 10-foot, 2-foot clear on either side. So Kurt and I spent a lot of time talking about that. So we've got the extra width. A lot of these structures are going to be very, very large. But one of the big things you'll see on Big Beaver, that one, very large, but it's to try and make it more pedestrian friendly so people want to walk under there. There's more light, try and shield some of the sound. You're going to have the 10-foot paths to try and make some of those. As I told them, I said, whatever you built is going to be here for 50 years. Whatever I can't get now, I'm going to be the one that they blame in 50 years. Exactly. So I said, we pushed hard. We met with them that a gazillion times. I mean, right now they've got an army of people working on this project. I mean, they got, I don't know, countless consultants. I mean, they got 3, 4, 5 people that call me every day. And every day it's a new day. I just got a note today. I sent an email yesterday. Are those the most current dates? Yep, Bill, those are the most current dates. I emailed today, and 2 of them changed. Bridge demos, it's a moving target. They just moved 2 more dates today. Closure of Coolidge, that just changed. So when the Coolidge Bridge got demoed I don't know if it's this weekend anymore, but they were going to close Coolidge and just maintain northbound traffic, I believe. Don't quote me on that. But Now, they're still going to do the demo, but not do the closure. The closure will come up a few weeks after that. They don't know exactly when because there's other stuff they have to do. But those types of things, for me to try and get that message out to everybody is very difficult because I'm kind of the boy who cried wolf right now, within the city and outside the city. So, but we're doing our best to try and get that message out. Stephanie and Cindy have done a wonderful job. I'll send them stuff, and they say, no, you can't change it. I just posted that. I said, well,
Councilman Pennington, you...
So yeah, I've been on city council for 7 years. I never congratulated your department, but I'm amazed yearly on how you guys come up with funding, the tri-party funding and the matching funds. And when people talk about our roads in Troy, I tell them, it's because of the fiscal situation we're in. It's because, your department, the quality people we have in the city, they go out and, know how to get these things.
Kurt's guys, DPW is a big part of this, and a lot of it is the better way to say it, the concrete paver that we had. He's fast, he's efficient, and he's cheap. We got more work done for that, and we were able to parlay that as well into additional work. One, because he could do a lot of work. Two, because he was very cost efficient. So those types of things, when you have that asset, helps a great deal as well.
That's part of my other question is, you said since 2016 we've had all of our border, we're going to have all of our border main roads redone. Is that the same contractor?
No, these are all multiple contracts. Some have been federal, like DeQuinder was a federally funded major road reconstruct and widening.
I'm sure Dan's did some work.
Yeah, Dan's did both of those. South Boulevard's been a mix. I mean, we had originally looked at one place, we had some issues, we went back to Livernois to Rochester, the bids came in cheap, that was Cadillac, and we were able to take that $300,000 bid savings and go from Rochester to John R. So we got 2 miles in one contract, reconstructed the entire intersection. I mean, we've seen that type of thing where we've seen cost savings, and rather just say, oh, we look for what we can do. We're out there already, we're working, let's throw that money in there, because the contractor's like, sure, I'll go another mile for the 300 grand, it works out with his cost. So we want to try and take those opportunities where somebody's already out there, you're already got traffic messed up. Let's try and do it rather than mobilize, okay, so we did 1 mile and we go back out and do the next mile, or the maintenance overlay on Adams. That's a perfect opportunity. I mean, we can add an extra mile for 240 grand. Typically what we do on a major road when we do an overlay is a little heavier, like what we've done on Waddles and what you see on Square Lake, and it costs us $750,000 to $950,000 a mile. So it is a larger scope and scale of a project, but what we know from the county's projects is we're getting a huge cost benefit. I mean, because you're looking at, I think it's a $52 million contract.
So my follow-up question to that would be, so it's all different contractors, and so you get, different people use different methods and different materials. Is there some kind of grading where, like 10, 15 years down the road, when, we're no longer involved, and one of these major roads fails prematurely, is there some type of, I know you really can't go back against them, but at least, is there like some type of system that grades the contractors?
No, I mean, in MDOT there is. I mean, on a federally funded job, you have to be pre-qualified. So if you're doing a traffic signal, you need to be pre-qualified. If you're doing asphalt paving, everything, even for the design end, you have to be pre-qualified, and it's kind of the chicken and the egg. Well, how can I get qualified if I've never done it before? Well, you'll hire somebody that has done it. That's literally what a consultant will do. If they want to get an MDOT job and they're not qualified, they hire someone. The contractor will do the same thing. What you will see, and what you will see within the next 6 months or so, is kind of the state mandated warranties. Anything $2 million or over of road items will require a warranty, regardless of whose money it is. That is coming. That is. MML's got a whole litany of stuff. They're working on training, so I mean, I've not sent anything to you yet, but that is coming. We have warranties on we have 2-year maintenance bonds, so I mean, if something fails, and typically if it's going to fail prematurely, it happens pretty quick. We don't have the ASR problem that we had years ago. That was discovered, it's been corrected. Most of the ASR pavement is out. We still got some small pieces here and there. So those types of large scale type things we're not seeing anymore because they've been addressed. We address them in the pavement design itself. I mean, the asphalt pavements that we're using now are much better than what we used before. A lot of them, people don't like them as much because they look a little rougher on the surface, but they wear wonderfully. So a lot of that stuff, there's all kinds of research. I mean, the concrete guy will tell you the asphalt guy he's not as green friendly as the concrete guy. And it's all, yeah, and there are trade-offs in whatever you do. And for a long time in Troy, asphalt pavement was considered temporary. When I started here, that's literally what I was told. If you put an asphalt pavement, that's temporary. That was the mindset. Heck, they wanted concrete. Since '65, that's when the local road standard changed to require 28-foot wide concrete pavements. That's kind of just the mindset that went around. Now with asphalt pavement, that's not really the mindset. And a lot of people look at it and they call it perpetual pavement. You put down 9-10 inches of asphalt, come back in 15-20 years, you mill off 1.5 inches. If you got a lot of wear, you mill off 3, put it back on, you're back in business real quick. Concrete pavement, well, you got to cut out a slab, put it down, pour it, you got to let it cure, you got to flip it, do the other side, if you got driveways, you got to do half width, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of, but if you got a road like Crooks or Rochester or Big Beaver where you got high volumes, 50, 60,000 vehicles a day, you got 3, 4, 5% trucks. That concrete still is superior to bridge that type of traffic, that type of loading, and that's really what you're seeing on. John R. is going to be kind of one of the first majors we've done in asphalt. It's a 3-lane widening. We went through the reevaluation of the EA. We went from a 5-lane to a 3-lane. It's asphalt. But that would be a road in the future. It's a county road, 2 miles, say 15, 20 years. They'd have some problems. They can go out there and mill off 1.5 inches and do a quick maintenance overlay, or if they want to do a heavy one, they mill off 3. But that's a good use for that road because it doesn't connect to 59. So it's not carrying the truck traffic. It is kind of a true commuter connector route, so it's a lot more vehicular traffic. And there's a lot of people that live there, but if you're going somewhere, you're going on DeQuinder, you're going on Rochester. You're not taking John R. If you're taking John R, if you're just going up to the hills.
Any more road questions?
Just a quick one. Sure. So when you say the capital needs for our roads is $130 million to bring them all up to good, in a perfect ideal world where we could do all the work at once, is that just the locally owned roads, or does that also include road commission roads?
No, that
was just locals. Just
No.
locals, okay.
No,
Yeah, that's.
the 134 was for everything, it was for local, that was a total local, major and county.
Including county, okay. Great. Okay. That's a lot.
Just briefly.
I'm a little passionate about this.
Probably a small transfer back.
You know, there's a lot of,
Quite transfer.
just, you know, there's a lot of talk at the state level about raising the gas tax to get money for roads. In Lansing's usual fashion, we're not going to see that money trickle down to the local level because of the formulas that are used, Act 51. So all this money that they're talking about at the state level is really not going to trickle down to us.
Yeah, and I've seen some reports. I mean, because there's a lot of issues with it, just based on Act 51. And MDOT right now, over 1/3 of their dollars go to pay debt because they've bonded so much over the years, Build Michigan and all those. So they have a problem where we don't have debt. So I mean, if they were to get additional federal dollars, they have to figure out a way to match it. And that's some of the unique stuff they did on the design, build, finance, maintain segment 3. And that, because they don't have the ability. So they have so much debt. So a lot of that new money, and I've seen one report, I don't know if it's fully accurate, but it was one kind of fiscal agency that kind of reviewed it, and it showed about 70% of that new money, that 45 cents, going to the state. That was about the split. Wow. Yeah, so it's a big chunk of money, but a big chunk of that would still be used to pay for debt. I mean, because right now we're waiting on the second 600 million of the 1.2 billion. Well, that's all discretionary. There's no guarantee that in 2021 that extra the first 600 million statutory, so we get that. So vehicle registrations, the gas tax increase, all that stuff. So that stuff we get. We've seen a bump. The county has seen a pretty good bump, and that's why you've seen some increased activities from the road commission. They're doing a lot with it. That extra 600 million, whether that trickles all down, I don't know, because it's discretionary. So I mean, if you got an issue that you need to address, I mean, all the new standards on water, on stormwater, I mean, there's all these unfunded mandates that are coming down. So that money, and that's the biggest thing I've heard from people when I talk to them is, hey, I'll pay for roads as long as you guarantee it can't be used for something else. You make it statutory. You make it so I pay an extra 25 cents, an extra 45 cents. I'll pay it all day long because I just blew up 2 tires and it cost me $800. I'll pay that all day long as it's statutory. And they cannot take that money and move it somewhere else. And I think that's the key. If you can make that happen, I think you could get most everyone in this room. I probably drive further than most people here, and I would gladly pay it. I was pushing for a hot lane on I-75, a toll lane, where I could pay to drive during peak hour. In Minnesota, they do it. You can pay to drive in that lane if you don't have multiple.
Just one lane?
Well, that's HOV. The 4th lane on I-75 is going to be HOV.
Right.
In some areas where you can toll, they call them hot lanes. You pay a fee. If you don't have multiple people, you can drive in that lane during peak hours.
Oh, okay.
There's there's all kinds of stuff out there, vehicle miles traveled, and all this stuff that's being worked on outside of the state. I mean, it's the stuff that's going on, it's the intelligence stuff, the autonomous vehicles, all that stuff, everything. And we're kind of just on the cusp of most of this stuff, so it's pretty interesting when we're still trying to figure out how to fill potholes.
Thank you, Bill. Councilman Robert, do you have any other questions?
No, I just wanted to, I always say DPW, city engineer, they're like the unsung heroes behind the scenes. And I do have quite that legitimate question, but secondly, I love to watch him geek out about our roads, and the budget study gives you a chance to do it, so thank you. I did have one other question on the firefighters, the Jaws of Life, the electric, will those be lighter too? Because those, I don't even know how. I wanted to sign up to be a volunteer, and I can't even pick those things up.
You still can. We're always accepting applications. But yeah, the equipment we have now is dependent on the tool, anywhere between 30 to 70 pounds, and the new equipment is probably about 2/3 of that, or even half, depending on the tool. So it's going to be a lot easier for the firefighters to use.
Okay, cool.
So while you're up, so
see what you started.
The fire department, the signal preemption, I thought we already had those on some roads.
We do, and what we've got currently is the technology is infrared, so it's line of sight. So many years ago when I first joined, we used to have these great big liquid-filled strobe lights that we had mounted on the trucks, and it was a visual light that the traffic signal receiver saw. Then they went to infrared. It works good as long as there's nothing in the way. So if there's a large truck in the way, if there's fog in the way, if the lenses are dirty, if it's misaligned, it doesn't always work. With the new GPS, it's obviously based off of satellite, and there's technology built in that it isn't just the signal ahead that changes. It's based on your direction of travel, your speed of travel. If you turn the turn signal on, it will start what we call flushing intersections ahead, so that traffic gets to be flowing, and it's a smoother transition for us to get to the scene versus just traffic light to traffic light waiting for the other traffic to stop and us to go through.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so
now, the 2 days, they're going to loan them to council just to try
I wouldn't say loan, but anything else for the fire department?
Anything for the fire department? Thank you. Councilman Pennington, do you have any other questions?
No.
Councilwoman Abraham? Do you have any questions?
Not so much a question, but just a couple comments. One, thanks Mark and staff for a very clear, concise budget. It's extremely straightforward. I think one of the cleanest I've seen in 4 years. The other comment I would make is that, as usual, Troy is a bellwether for, I think, what might be happening in the rest of the state. We're just on the cusp with the Headley, with the Prop A. We had State Representative Krupa at the council meeting on Monday. She shared some things about what's going on in Lansing, and I know she was coming back in May. I'm wondering if this might be something that she might be able to comment on and see if there's momentum, any sort of energy with the state legislature to maybe address what we're seeing now and what other communities are going to see later. Perhaps State Senator McMorrow could also be engaged as well, because like many other things, we're seeing it first, we're feeling it first, and if we can get ahead of the game and maybe even prevent some communities from experiencing any of the shortfalls we're starting to experience, I think that would benefit the entire region, not just the city.
I think that's, spot on, but unfortunately for the city of Troy, because of our cap is really
What's pushing us over?
pushing us compared to other cities, in my opinion. Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Baker, did you have any?
Thanks, Mayor. I don't have any specific questions tonight. I think that's a testament to you, Mark, and Tom, and staff for putting together, like Councilman Abraham just said, a very clear budget. I'm looking forward to Monday night's conversation on some specific issues. I think probably more of my questions will go there. I also want to say I think it's ironic that our biggest talker tonight is on roads and we're not spending as much money. I'm not sure how I worked out.
Setting up for 3 years.
But I do just fascinating to hear it. Thank you. I think it's important for our residents to hear that obviously these things are well thought out. And certainly just because we're not doing as many major road projects and subdivisions, if there's an emergency situation, we're always there to help and we're not going to just wait until, right? I mean, that's clear. I mean, if there's an issue, we can still be addressed. So that's it for tonight.
Thanks. Councilman Henderson?
Yeah, just one other comment, and it's on page 5 on the handout, and it's about the taxable values. It's interesting that 2018-19, it appears that the residential taxable value is higher than 09-10, which was when we started to plummet, right? But naturally, the problematic area is the commercial and industrial. So 2 questions. One is, the residential, I know it's rebounded a little bit because of the just prices of houses and turnover in the city and that kind of thing, but how much of that is from new construction as well? I mean, I know we've got a lot of new residential in the last 4 or 5 years. Is there? I think that is a great question, and I would love to answer that, but that second part. The second part of that question, though, is on the commercial and industrial. Is there any forecasting that is going to see that kind of mirror?
Forecast it all. I mean, it's segregated and forecasted all.
Is that going to come back, do you think, as strong as it was in 09-10 or no?
It's been if you want to do it, you can certainly answer. Obviously, on page 17, right, we talked about, on page 17, on page 21, right, we talk about residential, commercial, and industrial rates. I mean, overall, residential's been coming back, has been coming back for a while. We just seen last year, maybe, that commercial is starting to say slow coming.
The residential's doing really well. 2008 was your peak year. We're at like $5.8 billion total taxable value. The commercial industrial roll during the crash took a 33% hit. The industrial is doing fantastic right now. The auto companies are strong. They're selling industrial buildings for more money than they're selling office buildings for, which is, I've never seen that happen. And they're selling them for a lot more money than they're selling office buildings for. The problem is there's too much office. You got Gilbert revitalized everything in Detroit. We've got 17 million square feet of office space out there, just mostly in the Big Beaver corridor. So yeah, the occupancies are better. They're maybe 85, 87%, but I mean, historically, Troy was 95, 97%. People from all over the country wanted to be here. Well, now everyone's downtown. So the office sector is not coming back real fast right now. Industrial is doing fantastic, residential is doing better. However, we're already seeing a slowdown in the residential. Well, you're in the business, so I'm not going to preach to the choir. Residential housing values had increased for the last 5 years. 5, 6, 7%. Now we're down back around 4%, 3.8%. You'll see that start stretching out. So the residential market is slowing down. There just isn't anybody else to come in here. We're running out of stock. As far as your question about the new construction, we had over $100 million in taxable value in new construction this year. That was a big boom for us. We haven't had that much in quite some time. A lot of stuff that was partial last year, hotels, restaurants, whatever they were building, it all came on this year, 100% complete. 20 million of that taxable value is from new houses, new subdivisions, mainly. Joe Craig, right off of Big Beaver. There's 12 lots in there. Everything's selling for $1.5 million. So I mean, you're looking at $18 million just for 12 lots. That's a lot of taxable value. Mondrian's all over the place, so you get a $600,000 base home, we're picking up a ton of money that way. So yeah, this year was unusual in that 20 million of the taxable value in new was residential construction. That hasn't happened in a long, long time.
Nino, do you include single family and multiple family in residential?
No, and technically multiple family is commercial.
Yeah, I thought so.
So when all those apartment buildings start coming in, because we've got a ton of them on the books right now, they're not already under construction yet, that'll all go onto the commercial roll, because it's considered an income-producing property, it's not considered a single-family residential home.
Attached condos are the same?
No, condos are single-family homes. Yeah.
Is it rented?
If it rents, basically, if it rents, it's commercial, if it sells, if you dwell in it and it sells, it's a single family.
If it's a rented single family, is that commercial?
We don't
or is
make
it-
that distinction,
Okay.
yeah, because, the next guy that buys it could move into it. The primary purpose being to rent it, that's more of the driver.
Mayor, I have a comment related to this. So we've recognized that there's a lot of office space that's empty, and both Glenn Lapin in Economic Development and Brent Savidan in Planning, and even myself have tried to work with office building owners with alternate uses. And so one of the first things you think of, could you put residential in there? But then you find out the buildings they don't have enough plumbing to satisfy that. There's not enough height necessarily. So, it's a real difficult problem. I think the only thing that really could help us is if we were able to get some sort of regional headquarters in this area, so that there would have to be suppliers servicing that major corporation. That's about the only way that we'd be helped out.
Specific to that, the 888 building, they were talking about residential inside that building, is that?
No, not in the building. They're going to build, they're still,
Separate
they have an
building.
apartment building, which they're going to start construction
Okay.
very shortly.
I thought they were going to do something inside, is that not?
I never heard that.
Oh, I thought, originally, one of the conversations was residential in that building. Yeah.
But they're not.
But you're right, the plumbing will be problematic.
Problem. It's not as easy as you would think that to convert typical office buildings into residential.
Right, okay. Thanks.
I just have something that I would like to add to the topic, discussion topics for Monday, if there's consensus. And it deals with strategies. Number 5 strategy is to convene the Charter Revision Committee and evaluate the charter language and millage limitations and develop a strategy to fund the library past 2021. And it looks like we're going to talk about the library Monday, but it would be my opinion that because this is one of our strategies, that consensus of council is to convene the Charter Revision Committee. So I would ask that gets done. And so that we at some point can have a discussion what we want this committee to take a look at. I have 3 things that I would like them to take a look at, but maybe Monday, if council could think about some topics, I think it would be beneficial to staff. Would you agree with me, Lawyer, that that's it?
Always happy to take direction and suggestions from the governing body, and obviously that would be helpful. If not on Monday night, then certainly that's something that we look forward to.
But would you agree with me that because it's one of our strategies, that's what council is asking to have it convened? And that hasn't been done yet.
It certainly is one of the strategies that we will be implementing, yes.
If there's consensus, I would just like to talk a little bit about that Monday, to give some direction to staff. I have some three personal issues that I would like to have them take a look at. Councilwoman Howard?
I think related to that, related to the library funding on there, bond rating, we had a study session several years ago, maybe a re-review on some level, 1 or 2 charts here. I'm not talking about the hour-long discussion we had before, but I tried to go back into my mental archives on that, and just a reminder of the challenge that faces us as a council, and you're held to it to protect that AAA bond rating is right on the city manager's deliverables, if you will. And what that means, I think a refresher for all of us and everybody paying attention as part of that dialogue is critical and timely.
Any other issues or comments for staff regarding the topics for Monday? Anything anyone else would like to see for Monday? And if you don't think of it tonight, send an email to City Manager Miller. Okay. Council all set for tonight? Okay, it's an opportunity for public comment. Anyone wish to speak this evening? Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Great job, staff, as you know. We're adjourned.